What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 23, one of my favorite numbers, actually. And I want to thank you all for tuning in last week, especially on YouTube. That episode got quite a bit more views than the last previous episode, so thank you for that. I do appreciate that. Hopefully, the conversation around GameStop was good and insightful. Hope you also had a good week and got some gaming in, and hopefully your summer's going awesome. I mean, we're like midway summer, things are heating up, and looking at the forecast here in the Pacific Northwest, we got a heater coming in next week. I mean, we got a couple, like 3 consecutive days of 100 plus degrees weather, which is, every year we usually get a stretch like that, but it's still, it always hits us pretty hard. You know what I mean? Now, I know for those of you that live, down south or in places like New Mexico, Arizona, you're like, bruh, this is like every day for 3 months straight. I hear you. And like I said, I like the warm weather. And thank the Lord, we've got some AC and it's working. So we'll be okay. We'll get through. But it's just a rarity, here in the Pacific Northwest. But either way, it's going to be hot. But it's all right. Sorry. It's okay. Now, I was actually pretty busy at work this past week, but I did manage to sneak some game time in. Not as much as I'd like, but I was kind of just getting in little short stints here and there. And I'll talk about the games that I'm playing here in just a moment. But there are some cool games that have come out this week. Stray came out on the PlayStation and PC. That's actually a day and date title for PlayStation Plus, and it seems to have drawn in quite a few players. Though I'm really curious on a sales point how that game's doing and if the developers are happy. Now, again, you always want lots of people playing your games, but just because if people aren't buying your game, you're not necessarily making money unless you got a lot of money up front or it's on a per download basis type of thing. We're not going to get into that, but that seems to have been pretty popular. A lot of people have playing it, especially on Twitch, are enjoying it. I got to say, I feel like it's one of those games, though, that are going to kind of just come and go, and it's just like a flash in the pan type of thing. But we'll see, and maybe I'll try it out here soon. It's fairly short from what I can see, which I dig, so I tend to like those short, concise experiences, so we'll see. Seems to be doing pretty well. And another one released that I've been looking forward to, as I've mentioned multiple times here on the podcast, Live Alive, or what is it, Alive? I don't know how you say it, but either way, I'm looking forward to that. That came out on the Switch. The first time it's been released here in the West, which is pretty dope. So I definitely I'm going to pick that up here soon, especially since I'll be going on another trip here soon, and I need a good game to play on the old switcheroo. So things are looking up, especially in the gaming space, and quite a bit of news to dig into as well. Now, remember, for those that are new and uninitiated to the show, remember the best way you can support the show is to drop a comment if you're listening here on YouTube, or leave us a nice rating on the podcast platform that you are consuming on. It helps us get into the algorithms, helps people find the show, and it is always much appreciated. You can also join me over on Locals, the Patreon-esque like platform at thegamesitechronicles.locals.com. You can also listen to the podcast there if you choose. And speaking of YouTube, don't forget to subscribe over on YouTube. And every now and then I'll drop a YouTube short and kind of get into the vertical video format game here and there, which are pretty fun. So check those out. You can follow me on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. And remember, new episodes of the show go live each and every week, Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, for this week's show, I want to talk about single-player games. There's been some news that have dropped related to Arkane Studios. Remember, that's the Microsoft-owned studios. And I feel like it's a good segue into that topic. So I want to dive into that a little bit. I think it's pretty interesting stuff. And also, a couple of the news stories I wanted to dive into seems to be there's some development woes for the new Assassin's Creed game over at Ubisoft. And, of course, some controversy around The Last of Us Part 1 coming soon for the PlayStation 5. But before we get into that, let's talk about the games that we're playing. And remember, let me know what games you're playing by writing into the show so I can get that into this segment. It's always fun to hear about that. What have I been playing? Really, it's just one game. I've been continuing Ghostwire Tokyo. I talked about it last week. It's surprised me, as I mentioned last week, and I'm pretty invested in this game. It's the only game I just want to play right now. Now, I'm only on chapter 3, and I don't know how many chapters there are, but I'm still pretty early on, and we talked about the story. But I've played for like over 12 hours, about approximately 12 hours or so. And I've just been kind of working on side missions, finding and collecting lots of spirits and items, and I'm enjoying it. It's great, especially for kind of the small stints that I've had available to kind of sneak some gaming in. I'll just kind of hop on. I'll go maybe do a side mission or two, and then just kind of explore and collect spirits and look for items. And I'm just trying to kind of knock those things out because I'd like to get the platinum because I know it's obtainable, but man, there are so many collectibles and there are so many spirits. So I think in total there's like 240,000 spirits, and like each time you collect a spirit, it's approximately 100. So give or take, there's 240 of these spirits on the map that you have to collect, which is quite a bit. So it's a lot. It's a lot. But one thing I gotta say, the side missions are kind of funny and pretty unique, each one. And you know, a lot of them are kind of just, oh, hey, go here, do this type of thing. But I really like helping these spirits out. They kind of have some personality. The dialogue's fun. They're each kind of unique. And there's one in particular that I just couldn't help but laugh out loud while I was playing it. So the spirit was standing, we're like at a park or something in Tokyo. And they were saying like, oh, there's someone in this bathroom. There's only one stall, and I can't go in there because they haven't come out, and they're just like screaming in there. It's like, okay, that's kind of weird. So we go into this bathroom, and this spirit that's in the bathroom that's hogging the stall, it needs toilet paper. And so you have to go and find toilet paper to give to this spirit and help it. Like, you don't actually like help it wipe, but you give it toilet paper so it can finish its business. And that's the mission. You help it, it finishes its business, and it passes on to the other side. It's like, what? I just like I couldn't believe this mission, and it's just, I find it absolutely hilarious. But there's just random little missions like that I feel like there's a little charm, there's character here that is really enjoyable. I don't know. They're really fun. Like, there was another one where I was helping this guy. This guy's like, my business, all my employees left. And then you go to his business and you're kind of exploring it. And it turns out he's just kind of a bad boss. And so you have to go report that to this spirit. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I'll change my ways. And then he passes on. It's just, there's a lot of character to these spirits and some of these side quests, and I'm really enjoying that. I gotta say, I'm really enjoying it. And like I said before last week, this game is absolutely surprised me. It's encapsulated me, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Now, one of the other cool things about this game too is, so the big premise of the game is everyone's gone from Tokyo. You're like the only one left, except there's cats and dogs that are running around, and you can actually feed the dogs. And when you do so, they'll ask you to kind of follow them. Most of them, some will take you to like a little statue that you have to go find throughout the maps and pray to them, or they'll kind of dig you up some money. And it kind of reminded me of Ghost of Tsushima in that way, in that where there's like this natural environmental exploration, in the sense that like the foxes in Ghost of Tsushima, right? Where you find these little foxes and you follow them to these little statues, and they take you to these collectibles. And so it's kind of this natural environmental way of kind of doing that. And I dig it. I gotta say, I really dig it. Though I feel like it's a gamble each time you talk to a dog, because you feed it and they're like, oh, hey, follow me. And I was like, okay, I'm going to find a collectible here. And then he just digs up some money for you. And it's like, okay, well, better than nothing, I guess, but it's kind of cool. So I dig it in that sense. So as I keep playing it, hopefully I don't get burnt out on this game because, like I said, there's so many collectibles. And I do want to get them all, but I don't want to burn myself out from that. So we'll see how it goes as I continue through this game. And like I said, I do want to pick up Live a Live and dive into that. Watched a little bit of a gameplay on Twitch yesterday, just kind of as an aside, and it looks awesome, man. I gotta say, and from what I played on it, I dig it. So I really want to dive into that game. So I'll have more to report once I do. So now, let's dive into some of those news items. The first is there's news that came out that the next Assassin's Creed game has been delayed. So Bloomberg reported that the next Assassin's Creed game has been delayed. This is known as Assassin's Creed Rift, which was supposed to launch apparently in February 2023. I don't remember seeing that, but it seems kind of quick. And has now been moved to May or June of 2023. So moving it out just a few months. And actually, now that I think about it, Assassin's Creed Valhalla came out in fall of 2020 with the new console launches. So I guess 3 years. I guess that's a good break. That sounds about right. That's on track. So I guess I'm wrong. That's not too soon. So I gotta say, in seeing this news in the headline, I kind of just find it funny because at this point, I feel like with all the big games, big AAA games, they all drop their dates and then it gets moved out. Now I understand that targets move and things change and you want to make sure you get it right. And that's the reason why publishers do this is to drop a date. It helps drive pre-orders, get their numbers up and all that stuff, help with their fiscal years and forecasts, projections, all that stuff. I totally get it, but it's getting super old. I gotta say, it's getting so old because I think the other part of that too is that even with some of these delays, the games still come out and they're still broken. They're not ready. I mean, look at Dying Light 2. Just as an example, that game got delayed multiple times, and when it finally came out, it still had some pretty bad performance, especially on the PlayStation platform, and terrible bugs, like the one I encountered where you can't even fast travel, and it's an open world game, and that's a pretty big component to open world games, especially when you kind of have different sections that are literally like sectioned off, and it's meant to be fast travel between these sections of the game. So that just seems more and more common, and it just gets old. So it's like to the point where you can't even believe release dates anymore. You just kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. And it's kind of always been that case, but I just feel it's really, really ramped up. And they still use the pandemic as an excuse at this point. And look, I get it. We've all been there, but it's been almost 3 years. So come on. We should all be accustomed to this new, I guess, way of development and life and all that stuff. So I don't know. Now, I also believe that the next Assassin's Creed game is reportedly a live service game. I remember hearing about that. And I remember also hearing about rumors of a free-to-play one. So I don't know if this Assassin's Creed Rift is that game. Because I remember hearing, I think it was titled like Assassin's Creed Infinity. But I honestly can't remember the details. So if you know, correct me. Let me know if you happen to have some insight into that. But I wonder if the attempts to move into a more live service model, or if this happens to be the free-to-play game, is kind of causing some of those development issues, or maybe just things aren't syncing up or working right. Maybe trying to get some multiplayer components in there that's just not jiving. I don't know. I'm wondering if that's a contributing factor here. But kind of thinking about, would a live service model or, multiplayer free-to-play game work in the Assassin's Creed universe? And as much as I hate to say it, I could see a realm in which this works. Because if they did it in such a format to where you play as your own assassin, like a customized, create your own character style of assassin, it's part of the Brotherhood, and your Assassin's Creed headquarters maybe is kind of the game's hub, like a Destiny like hub world, and then you go out on missions either solo or with friends, to take out various targets. That could be kind of cool. And then maybe have some form of story that's kind of threaded through, some of these missions. And you level up, you get better weapons, better gear, that type of stuff. Maybe even have some kind of open environments that you can kind of go and explore. I don't know, man. Kind of a fun idea. I mean, I'd rather experience a game more like Origins. I've talked about my love for that game before here on the podcast, but I don't know. I think that type of model could work for Assassin's Creed. Now I know they tried multiplayer in one of the Assassin's Creed games. What was it? I think it was the one that was. God, it was like the one that came out pretty early on in the Xbox One, PS4 generation, and it just came out broken AF. I remember that. I remember seeing pictures and videos of that stuff. But I don't know. I think it could work if that's the direction that they want to go. But I would much rather see an Origins like experience. A little bit more contained than the recent entries of Odyssey and Valhalla. Smaller scale, still open world, still kind of in the RPG realm. But just I don't know. Origins was great. I thought it had a good story. I liked it was big enough, but not too big in my opinion. And it was so much fun to explore, Egypt. So you find a great location. I think a lot of people have always wanted to, Japan. I mean, Ghost of Tsushima kind of was Assassin's Creed Japan, but you do something like that, it could be pretty cool. I don't know. I would much rather see that, but it seems like the world's going to this live service model, so we shall see about that. The other piece of news that I wanted to touch on is there have been some details that emerged regarding The Last of Us Part 1. Now remember, The Last of Us Part 1 is the remake for the PlayStation 5 of the beloved, at least, well, it is beloved. It's certainly one of my favorite games of all time, The Last of Us, which originally came out in 2013. I think it was May of 2013 on the PlayStation 3. And I remember that pretty vividly. So, it all appears to have started when some footage from the game leaked online. So it was about 3 clips, approximately 6 minutes long, leaked, shared and leaked via Twitter. And the videos showed off some combat sections. I think 2 of the videos were just, basic combat sections. And the third was Joel at a workbench upgrading one of his weapons. And so this leak also stated there's 2 modes. There's a fidelity mode, 4K targeting 40 FPS, and a performance mode which is 60 FPS with a dynamic resolution. And the kind of feedback from this leak, actually, well, excuse me, we'll get to that in a second. The leak also claimed that the game doesn't look good and only has visual improvements. There are no gameplay improvements, and that kind of seems to be what a lot of people are drawing in this consensus. Now, Sony, before I get to that, hold on, but yeah, the consensus is around these leaks is that it's just fidelity, graphic improvements, there's no gameplay improvements, and that it looks the same. That seems to be what a lot of people are saying out there. Now, Sony and Naughty Dog finally did, a couple days later after these leaks, they did release their own extended look at the gameplay, along with some additional info. And so they released, it was about a 10-minute long video that shows off quite a bit of gameplay, and it's got Neil Druckmann and a couple other of the devs talking about some of the improvements that they've made to the game in detail, I gotta say. And I checked out the video, and obviously there's graphical updates, which I got to say, when you look at it, when they show some of those side by side comparisons of like, here's the old game, here's the new PS5 version, it's pretty wild. Like these are pretty big updates, especially from an environmental point. The lighting, the character models look better. It just runs. It's just everything's more dense, lush, much more beautiful. So that's seems pretty significant to me. But they also talked about quite a few other updates. So they've improved facial animations in terms of being able to kind of even just little subtle facial movements. They've been able to capture that and get that in the game. Lighting is obviously improved. They talked about physics and particle effects. So like when you throw smoke bombs or even bullets ricocheting off of blocks or different walls and stuff like that, you'll see particles kind of going all over in the map around your characters and stuff like that. They talked about enemy AI improvements. And so they've used what they built from part 2 and improved upon that. They also talked about AI improvements with your buddies, so your companion characters as you're playing through that. And they said that they've improved it to such that they're actually reacting to enemy movements. And so it makes like stealth segments more immersive because your buddy AIs will actually avoid being seen. And I think this is good because I remember in The Last of Us Part 1, it was pretty obvious, like, you're Joel and you're hiding from the enemies, and then Ellie, she's kind of running around. She'll follow you and kind of stay close and stuff like that. But as you're kind of moving around, there are sections where she's like literally just out in the open in front of the enemy, but she's still hidden. And I put hidden in quotes there because you're still stealth. So it's, I guess, immersion breaking in that sense, kind of funny. And so apparently with this new buddy AI, it has fixed that, which I think that's pretty cool. They also talked about cleaner player movements in the way that they've actually captured the way real people move, just walking, running, turning, and I think they're using some sort of AI to capture the most natural movements based on how you're moving your character. So it's more natural and fluid. They've added a permadeath mode, a speed run mode. There's more unlockables such as outfits. You can change the character outfits. And they also mentioned tons of new accessibility options, which they're really good at this. One of them was audio descriptions. So like almost like a storybook, like narrative, where they're describing the scene to you, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. That's really cool from an accessibility standpoint. And then, as I mentioned before, major environmental improvements, completely reimagined in some cases. DualSense support with adaptive triggers, and they mentioned the adaptive triggers feeling different and having different resistance depending on the weapon that you're using, especially with the bow. So that's pretty cool. And then lots of haptic feedback throughout the game depending on your walking. They even mentioned like the famous scene where Joel is petting the giraffe. You can actually feel that in the haptic feedback on the DualSense controller. So that sounds pretty cool. And so I gotta say, it's a pretty cool video. So I highly recommend you check it out if you're interested in this game, because they go into some pretty nerdy details there, and that's a lot of stuff in my opinion. Actually, not even in my opinion. I think objectively, that's a lot of stuff that they've improved on, and you can kind of see it within the evidence they present in the video. But I think with a lot of these improvements, though, are going to be taken for granted, we as players. Like lighting, the sound design, environmental upgrades, improved movements with the characters being more natural, the AI and stuff like that. I think those are all valid improvements, and when you kind of see it within the context of that video, like the objective evidence, it's super noticeable, and I think it's a testament to how all the work that they've done. But I think we as players are going to take it for granted and kind of brush it off because it is so natural. And I think it's going to hardly be noticeable in some instances, especially some of that like AI stuff, some of the environment, particle effects, all that stuff, because unless you're looking for those things, it's just going to immerse you more into this game. And it kind of reminds me of like good sound design, right? You think about a game that has really good sound design or good music that fits in perfectly with it, you hardly notice those things because it is so good. It gets you immersed into the game to where it almost feels natural. That's what they're going for. And so you almost take it for granted because these things are so good, you just hardly notice them. And I think I have a feeling that's going to be the case with this game. That there's going to be all these valid, awesome improvements, but a lot of people are just going to kind of take them for granted because you just become immersed into this game, and it's there. A lot of these things are going to be very subtle, but valid improvements to the game, and it's funny because that level of immersion is all caused by these improvements. The better environments, better lighting, particle effects, now more natural movements, facial gestures, all this stuff. It's going to seem much more natural and kind of the way it should be. So I think it'll be really interesting in that respect. But like I said, check out the video. It's pretty cool to see evidence of that stuff and just kind of see the thought process behind it. Now, the other controversy I saw around this is, and again, primarily on Twitter. You gotta love Twitter. But folks are complaining about the price, of course. The old Sony shouldn't charge $70 for a game. And, I'm not going to get into the whole $70 price thing. We've talked about game prices on an earlier episode. And what I said there, and my point still holds true. And games have never been cheaper or more accessible than they are today. So I'm going to brush that aside. But I've also seen some folks talk about this should be a PS Plus game. This should be a day and date PlayStation Plus game. And I got to ask, why? Why does this game need to be on PlayStation Plus? Now, some have said, oh, it'll boost subscription numbers. And, that should be their focus, but why? Again, I ask why. How is that more important than game sales? This isn't Xbox. Xbox doesn't care about game sales. They're all about their subscription numbers. PlayStation is game sales first and then subscriptions. So why? Some people have pointed out that, this is, there's not many improvements here. There's, this is the third time they've released this game, and it's like, okay, well, I just talked to you about all of the improvements, but still, that doesn't answer the question why you think this needs to be on the subscription platform. I still don't buy into this notion that subscription is king, and it should be the number one focus for these companies. I don't. And if game sales don't matter, then you only have that subscription pool to fund your games, and I don't think there's enough slices in that pie to feed game development costs as we know it today. I feel like I'm repeating myself. We've talked about this before, but I don't see that, and I don't think that should be the focus. I think game sales are important, and I do believe that this if PlayStation were to shift focus into the Xbox mentality of a subscription is king, then I do think that would hurt game quality. And I think that chasing those subscription numbers and offsetting the development cost with microtransactions, I think you then get to a point where it's a race to the bottom, like we've seen in the mobile space. Because you're changing customer perception, you're changing expectations to where it's all about, your customer base doesn't want to pay for games because they expect to get these things for free, and then you have to offset those costs with monetization, and that changes the way you create and make games, and it's just this vicious cycle to where you get like what we see in the mobile space, and I don't want that in the console space. I really, really don't. So I I don't buy this. And I think Sony and PlayStation and Naughty Dog has every right to charge full price for this game. Absolutely. I mean, they talked about all the reasons and all the work that they've done for that. Are they not entitled to that work, to be compensated for that effort? I think so. And here's the thing too: if you don't want to pay full price for it, you don't have to. The market will speak to whether $70 is a valid price for that level of effort and what they're doing to this game. Now, I've talked about it. One thing I'm bummed about this game is it's not going to have the original game's multiplayer. I think that sucks. But we all know they're working on The Last of Us Factions, which is, going to be that live service game and all of that stuff. So I get it, but I'm still bummed about that. But we'll see how people respond to it and how well this game sells. If it's not worth the $70, then the market will tell it to be. But I honestly don't think that's the case, and I'm happy to support the dev and pay full price for this. Yes, have I played this game? Yeah, I've played this game multiple times. I own the original PlayStation 3 version. I own the PlayStation 4 remastered version. But this is one of my favorite games of all time, and call me a sucker if you want, but I think it's one of the greatest games ever made, and it's such an impactful story. So I'll leave it at that. But I just still don't understand that what is controversial here. I think again, go watch that video. I think there's a lot of cool stuff happening in this game, and maybe it's not the remake that people want. And so I ask, then what do you want? Like what do you want changed? Because you don't want to change the game. You want it to be fundamentally the same. So what can we change? What can you do different? Like, what are you expecting here? And I think, again, we're already starting to see that effect around the Game Pass effect, as I like to call it, where people just don't want to pay for games, I guess, So I guess you get what you pay for. But either way, let me know what you think about this. And like I said, for the 50th time, check out that video. I think it's pretty cool, especially if you're into some of that nerdy stuff. Now, 30 minutes or so into the show, let's get into the main topic, which is single-player games. And are we about to see the end of single-player games? So I came across this article from DualShockers, which I actually need to explore this site a little bit more. They seem to do some decent work over there. But the article stated that Arkane Studios, the guys behind Dishonored, most recently Deathloop, have no interest in creating linear-based games again. So I want to read some of the article here. So I'll read, I think, a couple paragraphs here just to set up some context. So DualShockers reports, and they say, quote, Rock Paper Shotgun recently had the opportunity to interview some of the team at Arkane Studios, including campaign director Dana Nightingale and studio and co-creative director Dinga Bakaba. During their discussion, the pair expressed their love for making games that have no right way to play and can be revisited numerous times by the player. Bakaba says that at Arkane, he says, quote, at Arkane, we care a lot about the playfulness of getting towards an ending. We like to have several endings on our games. It's interesting, but it's really about the journey. What's interesting is people setting their own challenges and deciding what the game is for them. End quote. And we're still in the article here. They went on to discuss the lessons learned from Deathloop and if the hugely successful game had altered the distinct Arkane DNA. Nightingale responds by saying that she doesn't feel any interest in making a completely linear game again. It's not something I want to do again. I fell in love with the way Deathloop is structured, where the players' goals are their own. The idea of saying, okay, mission 1, mission 2, mission 3, that feels like a step backwards to me. The developers went on to say that they hope the success of non-linear games such as Deathloop encourages developers to take some risks, even with bigger AAA titles. It's clear that Deathloop was a risk that paid off for Arkane after PlayStation revealed that it was the 18th most downloaded PlayStation 5 game for 2021 in in Canada. End quote. So, pretty interesting. Now, I find it a little confusing because I feel that even in what they would consider a linear game like Dishonored, you still had so many ways to approach it. And you could play it the way you do. I mean, there's tons of like speedrun videos and tons of different videos out there of people blasting through Dishonored levels in a variety of different ways. Like you can either go super stealthy, super loud. There's different, really, they give you this tool set that allows you to creatively tackle, the way you play it. And so I felt that it was very open in that regard. Yes, you're playing linear, mission to mission, like she had mentioned, but you could still play it, I would say generally speaking, how you want it to within the tool sets. And there's different, play styles that come into play. Now, again, just like with any stealth game, it's you kind of generally between the two options of stealth or loud. But the way you kind of tackle it and the abilities that you use, I think that's what really lets you have that kind of creative freedom within the game. So I found that a little confusing. The other thing that I really don't understand is that phrase where the player's goals are their own. I don't understand how that's applicable to Deathloop. Maybe I played a different game, but if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure the goal was all the same for every player in Deathloop, and that was to stop the loop. And really, there's really only one way to do it, and how you get there is kind of up to you. But I kind of felt like, generally speaking, it seemed like there were only maybe a handful of solutions to really get to that goal. And again, we all had the same goal to stop the loop. So I guess I don't know. Maybe I'm misreading that or misinterpreting what they're saying there, but I just don't understand that. Now I can see the point where there a lot of times with Arkane games, people kind of set their own objectives in the sense of like, oh, I want to go all stealth, or I want to, in the case of Deathloop, maybe take out this character a certain way, and that's certainly valid. In Arkane definitely is great at that, to where, again, Arkane games, they give you a set of tools and an area and say, here's your objective, go do it however you want. So I don't know. I guess I just don't understand what they're saying, because I feel like Deathloop, as you're going through Deathloop, you kind of, the structure is very unique. I'll give them that. It's, they have this day system, and you kind of repeat these day cycles, and you can kind of go to these, predefined locations at any point during, the day, and kind of tackle it however you see fit. But the whole point is to explore enough of the game to where you finally figure out how to solve the puzzle, because we're all, again, reaching that same goal of stopping the loop. And you have to take out all your targets within the loop, one day cycle. So I don't know. I don't feel like it's as open as they think it is. And so I guess it just kind of baffles me a little bit. And like I said, you could explore areas and kind of figure out things in your own in Deathloop, but you're all still kind of reaching that preset goal. And like I said, I don't think there's too many different solutions to reach said goal. But either way, if I'm interpreting that right or wrong, regardless, I find this to be a complete bummer. Kind of bums me out to hear this from Arkane. I like Deathloop, for the most part. Kind of took me a little bit to ease into it, but I still thought it was a good game. And I enjoyed my time with it. Certainly had that Arkane touch to it, and you can clearly see the influences from games like Dishonored. But if I had to choose between, Deathloop and Dishonored, I would absolutely choose Dishonored. I think that franchise is awesome. I played all three of those games, loved them. I liked the mission structure. I liked the kind of the tools they give you, the stealth elements of it. the kind of aesthetic, the art style. I thought they were great. I thought they were really, really good games. And so I'm kind of bummed out about that because I would love to see more games like that. And I will say this, I do want to try Redfall when that comes out, their next game, but that's just yet another open world game. That's been confirmed. And so, am I alone in feeling that this trend that every game has to be open world is getting old? Am I the only one that is kind of getting tired of that? Like, not every game needs to be open world. There's a place in gaming for short linear experiences, because those are great and absolutely worth your time. And some of the best games ever created are linear. We were just talking about The Last of Us. That's a linear game. It's a narrative-driven game, and sure, it's designed completely different from games like Dishonored, but when we're talking about just the general premise of linear games, like, yeah, there's a place for that. Linearity is perfectly okay, and I don't know. I'm a fan of those types of games. Like I said, am I alone here? Hello? Is this thing on? Hello? Anybody here? I don't know. No, there's nothing wrong with open world games. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with open world games per se. But not everything needs to be that. You know what I mean? And this is definitely a trend that we've been seeing. And I think part of it has to do with the rise of live service games. There's been quite a few success stories in the last few years or so in the live service space. You know, with hits, the big one, Fortnite, that's obviously changed a lot of things. Apex Legends, Destiny 2 has seen meteoric success. Call of Duty Warzone, that's a big one. I'd even put The Division in there. I think that's been a fairly successful, albeit not as successful as these other ones, but good live service game. And another obvious one, GTA Online from Rockstar. That's an obvious live service hit. I mean, that game just prints money. It's crazy. And there's no doubt that everyone is chasing a piece of that pie. Everyone wants that live service money because, I mean, here's a couple examples. Fortnite generated $5.8 billion in revenue in 2021. 5.8 billion. Billion. That is a gross amount of money. That I can't even comprehend how much money that is. That's insane. Are you kidding me? How are you all still playing that game? Like, oh my gosh, that's insane. Warzone has reportedly generated $4 billion. That's $4 billion across 2020 and 2021. And that's excluding the other Call of Duty titles. That's insane. I mean, we're talking mad cash here. And again, those are the top of the success stories. I didn't even get into GTA Online. Like I said, GTA Online just prints money. And that GTA 5 came out in 2013. Next year will have been 10 years since GTA 5 was released. 10 years. And people are still buying and playing that game. I repeat myself, but that is insane. But we've seen others try to get into the space. Square Enix, we've talked about that multiple times, and with titles like Avengers, the big hit Babylon's Fall. I say that jokingly because that game was a disaster of a flop. Ubisoft has continually tried to get into this space with failed projects like Hyperscape. Anyone remember that game, Hyperscape? That, what is it, like Battle Royale style free-to-play shooter game? We had like weird neon lights and stuff like that. Yeah, that came and went pretty quick. And then they've got upcoming games that have been long in development, like Skull and Bones. That game, it's funny. I was actually watching a YouTube video about that game, and they were kind of reacting to the gameplay reveal that came out recently. We talked about that, and then they rewatched on the video the original gameplay trailer. Or not really gameplay, but like the original trailer for that 5 years ago. And my God, how that game has changed. And that's the live service effect. Look up the original trailer for that game back in 2017. It looks awesome. It looks like a dark, gritty pirate game. And you're like, hell yeah. Because I think that's what everyone wants. And instead, it got watered down into this live service, and as they put it, mobile looking game. And I mean, we'll see how it does, but the more I see of it, the less optimistic I am, especially when you can see what that game's potential was. Oh, that's disappointing. So disappointing. But even Sony themselves, PlayStation has been planning to get in this space as they plan on launching, I think it was approximately 10 live service titles by 2025. That's a lot. I think Gran Turismo 7 is technically one of them. So, because that's a live service model with updates, monetization, stuff like that. But that's a lot of games. So the chase for that money is on, and it's changed the way games are consumed and made. We talked a little bit about in the last segment with The Last of Us, right? That as we shift to subscription services and the way we consume games change, the way they're made has changed. And if game sales aren't a factor, they have to monetize them in other ways. And that's, you end up with this shift towards live service where everything is just monetized. Passes, costumes, all that jazz, all that stuff is in there. And if that's how you have to make your money, then that changes the way that games are made. And so with subscription services like Game Pass, I mean, I think we can already see how that's affected games on that side of the house over at Microsoft. I mean, look at Halo. Now, I know when Halo launched, it had a lot of favorable reception. Critical reception. I think a lot of players liked it. I think there are a lot of fans of the multiplayer. But there were still issues with that game. There's still a lot of valid criticisms to that game. And such as Forge, I think Lone Wolf, like a single player solo multiplayer playlist, like Lone Wolf, I don't think was there, and there was just a lot of features missing in the multiplayer space. Lackluster. I think there are complaints about lackluster content with seasonal content, and I think a lot of that persists even to this day. And it's been 8 months since that game's come out. What are you doing over there, 343? What? So that game comes out, I think, to a lot of people, even on the Xbox side, in a beta state. Oh, and the other thing they just launched in a beta state is co-op in the campaign. Co-op in a Halo game. I'm pretty sure every other Halo game has had co-op campaigns at launch. Halo 5 sure did. The previous one made by 343. Because the whole premise of that was you play in a squad cooperatively. But apparently that's a feature 8 months after the game's launch we have to have in beta. What? What are you talking about? Are you kidding me? But then you have then you have upcoming games like Redfall. I would not be surprised if that is monetized through some sort of seasonal style of content with costumes and all that stuff. And then you got games like Hellblade 2, which that's going to be presumably your linear style game. But where's that game? At the Game Awards last year, we saw a long demo of that game, and it's just nowhere to be found. Wasn't it anywhere in that Xbox showcase? Mind-blowing. Like, what's going on? So I think we're starting to see that effect. But the question is, back to single-player games, because this all ties in. Do you think single-player games are going to the wayside? Is this the end? Are we going to start to see a shift away from that if we haven't already? Now, I don't think so right away. Not right away, at least. And I'm confident that we'll continue to see titles, single player titles, linear style titles among indie devs. Kind of like we do today with like 2D platformers, Metroidvania style games. I'm confident we'll still continue to see that because this space, there's a lot of people that enjoy this space. But in the AAA space, I'm concerned that we're going to see less of these titles. And I think they'll continue to be kind of watered down. And these games will continue to demand more of our time, be heavily monetized, and this is all in order to cover the growing cost of video game development. Now, we've touched on this before, but the cost to make a game is continually rising in the AAA space. It's very, very expensive. And they want you to continue to play the game long after it's released. So that way you don't sell it back. That brings in the whole GameStop used game market. And then they also want to continue to try to make money off you. That's why you see, DLC. DLC back in the day when that originally started to come out in the, what was it, kind of early 2000s. And then you see season passes and all these microtransactions start to creep into these games because they need additional ways to make money. And if they can keep you playing their game and then get some additional money on top of that, that's how they're going to cover these costs and make money. That's just the current state of AAA gaming. And we'll get back into subscription services, but if game sales go out the window and you have subscription services and there's that subscription pie and that doesn't cover all the game costs, then they've got to make money elsewhere. So again, it's this cycle. It shifts the way games are made. It shifts how we consume games. And I think in the end, it's going to be a race to the bottom like we've seen in the mobile space. Now, I think the former Sony exec, Sean Layden, said it best. And I definitely think he was onto something. So back in 2020, in an article from gamesindustry.biz, he said, and I'm going to quote the article here. It's 4 paragraphs, so bear with me. Quote, Layden recalled the days of $1 million production budgets for the biggest games on the market and referred to a commonly stated theory that the cost of development has doubled with every new generation of consoles. The problem with that model is it's just not sustainable, he said, explaining that the current generation has seen cost development between $80 million and $150 million for most AAA games, excluding marketing costs, with production taking up to 5 years from start to finish. I don't think that in the next generation you can take those numbers and multiply them by 2 and think that you can grow, he continued. I think the industry as a whole needs to sit back and go, all right, what are we building? What's the audience expectation? What is the best way to get our story across? And what we need to say. It's hard for every adventure game to shoot for the 50 or 60 hour gameplay milestone because that's going to be so much more expensive to achieve. And in the end, you may close some interesting creators and their stories out of the market if that's the kind of threshold if they have to meet. We have to reevaluate that. End quote. And I think he goes on in the article to say that he would much prefer shorter game development time, say 3 years, to make a 12 to 15 hour game. And I think he's absolutely right. He would know. I mean, back in 2020, we're talking in the PlayStation 4 era, $80 to $150 million to make a AAA game. It's even more now, especially with inflation. My goodness. And that's excluding your marketing costs. So, I mean, we're probably sitting upwards of 200 and 250 million. I'm just assuming, but that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money, and that's a long time too. We talked about the average 5 year cycle to make games. That's not always the best way to go because you're not making any money for that 5 or so years per se, I'll say. And that's why I look at games like Miles Morales or that smaller Uncharted title, was it The Lost Legacy from Naughty Dog? And I look at those games, like those are smaller, more bite-sized experiences compared to their brothers or sisters, however you want to look at that, you know, in the likes of like a full Uncharted game or, you know, the Spider-Man game. But they're smaller titles. They're kind of those mid-title titles in that, you know, they kind of hit that 15, 20 hour mark. They're compact. They're still high quality, great stories, and awesome games. And they didn't take 5 years to make. I mean, Miles Morales, Spider-Man came out in 2018, and then Miles Morales in 2020, so 2 years, maybe 2.5. Perfect. I want more. I need more of that. That's perfect. That's what he's talking about here at Sean Layden. So I don't know. I think to kind of sum it all up, I think we're in an interesting time to where I don't think single player games are going away. I don't think they're, you know, dying per se, but I do think in the AAA space that the marketplace is shifting, and you're seeing this drive towards everyone chasing that live service dollar. And with this kind of compilation between rising game costs to the way consumers perceive game prices and the rise of subscription services, I mean, I think it's this formula for drastic changes that are going to change the games that we consume in the AAA space. And the market will dictate that. You know, I mean, so many people play live service games. I mean, look at the top games on Twitch. They're all multiplayer live service focused games. You know, the likes, you know, GTA Online, Call of Duty Warzone, you know, League of Legends, Valorant. I mean, you name it. Fortnite, Apex Legends, all of those. They're all up there. They make the money. And if that's what everyone wants to play, that's what we're going to get. Is that the world I want to live in? No. I enjoy most of those more single player focused experiences. I want to escape. I don't need to play with a bunch of I don't need to play with a bunch of kids hopped up on Mountain Dew screaming in the microphone because and get destroyed because that's all they do. It's not all I do. So I don't know. Maybe I'm the dinosaur here. Maybe I'm in the wrong, and I'm just worried about the games I love kind of going away. But I also think there's millions of you out there that are of a similar mindset, and I worry about this direction that we're heading because I don't want the console gaming space to end up like the mobile game space, to where it's just a bunch of shovelware. It's a bunch of games that are watered down, heavily monetized, and really just kind of crap. So that's my take on the current state of single player games. Definitely interesting stuff, but let me know what you guys think about single player games. Do you think they are dying or are going to be dead soon? Let me know down in the comments below. Appreciate you guys tuning into the show. Definitely a little longer than I thought, to be honest, hitting the hour mark, give or take, but good stuff nonetheless. Some pretty deep topics that kind of funny that I didn't really anticipate it, but the way the Last of Us topic and, you know, the Arkane articles kind of feed into one another, I think played out well for this particular episode. So I hope you guys are all doing well out there. Hope you are continuing to enjoy your summer and play some video games. And remember, the best way to support the show is drop a comment, leave a rating, and share the podcast. If you know any friends that might be interested in the show, let me just send them the link, send them my way. Let them tune into the show and all the rest. Stay safe out there. And until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.